In the first half of the course, we took a step-by-step approach to starting your business. We focused on what you need to do in order to succeed as an entrepreneur. I've mentioned a few times that 7 out of 10 businesses fail, and we built a toolkit to be sure that you wouldn't become one of those 7. And we're still building that toolkit. But in this lecture, I want to talk about another reason why businesses fail. And it's a reason that might surprise you. It's called entrepreneurial exhaustion. You might not take this seriously right away because you might be thinking, hey, I've got the energy for this. I won't get exhausted because I've got the passion and the drive and I've got what it takes to succeed. And you might be right. If you've got energy, passion, and drive, then that's great. You're definitely going to need it. But I'd caution you not to underestimate the demands of being an entrepreneur, because there can be consequences you might face by constantly working overtime as you build your business. You see, as an entrepreneur, there's a connection between your personal health and the health of your business. And many people overlook this connection. But taking on an overloaded work schedule for an extended period of time can have a severely negative impact on your health, your personal life, your social life, and it can ultimately cause your business to fail. Here's a fact. A lot of companies close down not necessarily because they're not profitable, but because the entrepreneur is exhausted, and so they voluntarily shut it down. Did you just get that? Now, this blows me away because businesses are shutting down because the entrepreneur that started them is simply worn out. And even if they are being successful, they're worn down and they decide that enough's enough. So they sell off the business at a low price or they shut down the company completely. And it happens more often than you think. The entrepreneur makes a choice between their work or their health. And the research proves that they're right. In 2006, a study at the University of California, Irvine demonstrated that working more than 51 hours per week over an extended period of time can triple the risk of having a heart attack. Working long hours also increases stress and can lead to problems with insomnia and high blood pressure. And that can cause you to make some really bad business decisions. Heck, I know I'm just getting stressed out thinking about this. In research I've done with Professor Shruti Sardushmukh of the University of South Australia and Professors Herman Aguinis and Donald F. Caracco of Indiana University, we found that entrepreneurs experience great stress due to role ambiguity and work-family conflict. Role ambiguity occurs when the entrepreneur jumps around throughout the company without a well-defined set of responsibilities. And work-family conflict occurs when the entrepreneur feels torn between the 2 most important duties in their life. That's their company and their loved ones. And they don't want to let either one of those parties down. But you don't need to do this. You don't need to choose one over the other. You can have your health and a successful business at the same time. There are things that you can do and steps that you can take to be sure that you don't fail because of exhaustion. That's what we're going to talk about today. Because this is an important thing to think about as you become an entrepreneur. It's something that too many entrepreneurs overlook, and they do so at the expense of their business, or worse, they do so at the expense of their health. So, why does this happen? And what can we do about it? Well, a lot of what's going on can be attributed to what Professor Donald Caracco calls the one-man band syndrome. The best way to understand the one-man band syndrome is to think about Dick Van Dyke. Do you remember the movie Mary Poppins? Well, in one of the early scenes of Mary Poppins, Dick Van Dyke is entertaining people on the street as a musician and poet. He's dancing around and singing, playing the drums, the cymbals, the accordion, and the tambourine all at once. He even has a horn on his shoulder that he plays by beating his head against it. And I especially like how it ends because he ends his song by hitting himself in the forehead with the cymbal, and he kind of gets a dazed look on his face. It's an amazing performance, it's entertaining, and it's also completely exhausting to watch. To make music, the one-man band has to exert an inordinate amount of energy. So, it would be a lot easier to have other people play some of those instruments. Yet, Dick Van Dyke fans would agree it wouldn't be quite the same. And if you had more people playing those instruments, it might even sound a little bit better too. Okay, I want you to really picture in your mind Dick Van Dyke's performance of the one-man band. Think about him jumping around and playing all those instruments. And think about how crazy he looks doing this. Because many entrepreneurs are like the one-man band. They want to be in charge of everything: design, sales, management, finance, production. After all, there was a time when they might have done it all. And, they may have actually been pretty good at it. At that time, it may have even been smart to do. After all, they were bootstrapping the operations. Whatever they could do themselves, that's what they did. This kept the costs down, and it also helped them to learn the different aspects of the business. In fact, this is what we often need to do to get a business off the ground. But if your business starts to grow, then you're going to reach a point where things are going to change. And if you're going to continue to be successful, then you're going to need to change as well. This means that you're going to have to let go of some of the things that you used to oversee so carefully. Now, this is harder than it sounds. You see, many entrepreneurs don't want to let go. They have a very hard time trusting other people to take over key aspects of the business, even when they've hired the right people to do it. You see, even when the people they've hired are capable, reliable, dependable people, they still have a hard time trusting anyone other than themselves to get the job done. And it's like they can't help themselves. And that's understandable because, after all, they want the job to be done a certain way. They care deeply that quality and service is maintained. And that sort of makes sense because they want to continue to run the organization like they did when they built it. It's what they know, and it's what they feel comfortable with, and also it's what they enjoy. But probably most importantly, they're scared of change. They don't want to mess with the formula that got them to where they are now. But here's the paradox. If the entrepreneur continues to run the company like they did when they built it, they're going to fail. That's right. The very approach that made them successful leads to their downfall. You see, it's one thing to have a leader that pays attention to details and holds people accountable, but it's another matter altogether to have a leader who doesn't trust the capabilities of their employees. And when this happens, they become micromanagers, and no one likes working for a micromanager. The managers get frustrated for getting their orders trumped, and the employees get frustrated because they're not being listened to either. And when this happens, productivity slows way down. You see, chain of command is an important concept in organizations. You want employees to respect their managers and work through them to deal with any company issues. But chain of command can also work the other way. The owner needs to respect the managers just as much. Let the managers handle the employees. Do not step over your managers. Now, savvy entrepreneurs promote or hire managers into leadership positions, and slowly they give them more and more responsibility. Now, that's a good idea because that keeps them motivated. Because smart performers want to perform. So don't stand in their way. Give them guidelines and what you expect. Hold them accountable to get the results that you want, and then cut them loose. Let them do their jobs. Let me rephrase what former General Electric CEO Jack Welch once said about how he became successful. So Jack Welch said, I was never the smartest guy in the room. From the first person I hired, I was never the smartest guy in the room, and that's a big deal. If you're a leader and you're the smartest guy in the room, you've got real problems. Well, Welch was talking about hiring people who know what they're doing better than you do, and then letting them do their thing. That's how he says he became successful. So, the first lesson for the entrepreneur to avoid exhaustion is to learn to delegate responsibilities to other people as the company grows. And I can't reiterate it enough. The worst thing you can do is micromanage. This doesn't help anyone. It might help to think about it this way. If you're truly successful in building your business, then you'll get to a point where the business wouldn't miss a beat if you weren't there. In fact, that should be your goal. As your business grows, slowly build it so that you are less and less necessary to its operations. Now, let's think about that for a second, because why would I say that? Why would I suggest that one of your goals should be to make yourself not essential to your own business? I mean, that sounds a little bit crazy, doesn't it? What would it be like if the entire business rests on you? Okay, first of all, imagine if you get sick, or if unexpected crises were to happen. Your business would probably fall apart. The less reliant the business is on you to keep it going, the stronger it's going to be. And the more secure it will be as well. Because if your business grows and you build it in a way that keeps you in a position where you're essential to all the key operations, then you're building your business with a giant weakness. And that giant weakness is you. Now, that might actually be tough to hear, but it's true. But also, on a lighter note, when I coach entrepreneurs, I ask them, if you could spend your time doing anything you wanted to do, what would it be? Now, they might say something like, I'd like to go back and spend more time designing new products. You know, I really enjoyed creating our product, but the business side has taken me away from the fun of being in the workshop. Now, I might reply to that person with, well, what can we do to get the business side covered so that you can get back in the lab? What challenges need to be addressed to make that happen? What's keeping you from getting this done? I like to think of this as an opportunity for an entrepreneur to create their dream job. I mean, that's why so many people become entrepreneurs in the first place. And it's very easy to lose sight of that. But since the owner has the autonomy to shape the company into whatever they want it to be, once they know what they really want, they can put others in the roles that they don't enjoy. You see, you build the company in a way that lets you do more of what you want to do. That's one of the beautiful benefits of being an entrepreneur. But more importantly, an entrepreneur can't get there when they're being the one-man band. So, whatever your reasons are for becoming an entrepreneur, I doubt it was to work yourself to exhaustion and have a heart attack. Remember that? As your company becomes larger, you have to accept this premise. I want you to say it over and over to yourself. You can't do it all. You can't do it all. You just can't do it all. Did you get that? I hope so, because you can't do it all. Because in my studies of companies, in my experiences coaching entrepreneurs, I've met a lot of small business owners who really struggle with this concept. You see, many entrepreneurs are so concerned that their business will fail that they don't think enough about how they're going to manage success. And not knowing how to manage success can lead to failure as well. So, what happens if an entrepreneur doesn't transition out of the one-man band role? Well, the stress of running so many different parts of the company can become overwhelming. And what I tell entrepreneurs in this situation is that not only do they risk the company falling apart, but they also risk having their personal life fall apart as well. You see, as the entrepreneur spends time working on the business, they're pulled away from home. So problems may start brewing at home, which causes more stress at work, and then it becomes a downward spiral. But there's another force that can come into play that leads to entrepreneurial exhaustion. Hubris. I mentioned hubris earlier in the course, and it occurs when a leader overestimates their abilities. It's excessive pride that's not in line with reality. You see, people with hubris think they're bulletproof. They actually know that they know more than everyone else. And simply put, they actually think they're invincible. This situation occurs with entrepreneurs because up to this point in their lives, they have been very successful. They've worked hard and they've made some pretty good decisions up to this point. And from these good decisions and this success, they start to gain confidence in their abilities. Now, this isn't necessarily bad. After all, we do gravitate to people who exude certainty and confidence. It's part of leadership. But in an uncertain world, people are seeking those types of leaders who can bring order and clarity to their lives. It's the nature of the paradox we're talking about here. Because no one's invincible. And all you have to do is read Sophocles' Oedipus Rex or Shakespeare's Hamlet to see that this is a universal problem that goes back hundreds, heck, it even goes back thousands of years. Or if you're not into reading classic literature, you can just read the Wall Street Journal, where the same lessons are played out in perhaps slightly different ways, but they're still very similar. The bottom line is that history is chock full of once great leaders who let hubris get the better of them. Now, this is true for being an entrepreneur too. So don't let it be your downfall as well. But it might be the case that the entrepreneur who started the business actually is the most passionate person in seeing it succeed. The company may have been successful because customers and employees believe in and like that entrepreneur. The founder may motivate people and inspire people to build the visionary's dream together. But how do you get this done? How do you get all your employees to share your motivation and passion? How do you clone your dedication and attentiveness? You see, you can't build a great business alone, but you need your employees and managers to be on the same page with you. Now, I don't mean that your employees and managers have to be exactly like you, but they do need to provide customers with the same degree of service and the same degree of consideration that you did when you were immersed in the day-to-day operations. So, how do entrepreneurs clone themselves in a way that ensures their customers will continue to be their customers even if the entrepreneur becomes less involved in the little details of the business? Okay, this is a good question. So, what's the answer? Well, the answer might be best illustrated with a story, because this is a question that entrepreneurs face all the time. And I could tell you 1,000 stories that share the same theme. The story I'm going to tell you begins with Walt Disney, but really it's about an entrepreneur I've worked with over the years from my hometown of Mitchell, Indiana. Now, in this series, I've talked a lot about Walt Disney. What can I say? He's my entrepreneurial hero. I love his story of going from a poor Midwestern farm boy to becoming a legendary entrepreneur. So, whenever I can, I like to visit Disney theme parks because I like to imagine what it must have been like for Walt to think up all those ideas about Disneyland and Walt Disney World. And then I think about what it must have taken to bring that imagination into the world. I think it's amazing. And I think if Walt could pull that off, then we should all be able to pull off our own dreams in this world as well. So, since I go there quite a bit, I'm fortunate to have a travel agent who arranges all my trips. Her name is Jamie Eubanks, and her business is called Magical Vacation Planner. Now, Jamie knows that I like to stay at Wilderness Lodge at Walt Disney World, and Jamie even knows my favorite room whenever I go there, and she books it for me. In fact, it's on the first floor near the gym and the nature trail. When I'm in that room, I can go right out my door and I can get my run in and get my workout in really easily. Jamie also knows which restaurants at Walt Disney World I like to eat at, and she makes sure I get reservations there, so it's a pretty good setup. And if I have any problems, I can call her up and she's right on it. She really makes my trips great. Now, I'm not the only person Jamie gives that great service to. She's great with all her clients, but that's where her problems began a couple of years ago. Because she was so good, word of mouth started to spread about her great service, and people from all over the country wanted to book their Disney vacations through her. Now, that's quite a testimony about her travel agency, because Mitchell, Indiana only has a population of 5,000, and I'm not there anymore, so now it's 4,999. So you wouldn't expect the world to be beating down her door in that little town. But it did. As her business got bigger, Jamie hired a few other agents for her company, and they did a good job. But between Jamie and her agents, they were having a really hard time keeping up. And that caused Jamie to worry, because she really enjoyed setting up memorable vacations for clients like me. But if she spent all her time with the clients, then she couldn't build the business. That's when I told Jamie that it was time for her business to grow up. She had to hire some experienced managerial talent to help her build the company, and she needed to figure out what she did well with her clients and then pass that approach along to her agents. The business had to get to a point where the clients felt like they always got the same great service whether they talked to Jamie or one of her clients, or one of her agents actually. This was a big challenge for her, but she rose to the occasion. She developed a protocol for how she wanted her agents to talk with the clients on the phone. Jamie also taught her agents sales management software that helped them build a profile of each client and what they actually liked on a trip. And since she realized that she was getting a lot of business from her website, she went ahead and hired a social media expert that had branding experience. You see, that allowed Jamie to concentrate more time building her business without losing that personal touch that made her so successful. Well, as a result of this strategy, Jamie went from having a couple of agents to now having 15 agents. And her business became one of the top 1% of recognized Disney travel agencies in the country, all from little Mitchell, Indiana. Now, I spoke with Jamie after she'd made these changes because she booked a trip for me and my students when we went to Walt Disney World recently. And she said she was nervous at first about taking my suggestions. But she also said that since she's professionalized the company, she's having more fun and her business is soaring. Okay, so how did Jamie get to this point? She found a way to clone herself. She identified what it was about her service that attracted so many customers. Then, she was able to use software and training to be sure that all her agents could provide the same exact service she did. You see, you want to do the same thing that Jamie did, and you want to develop your managers and agents into great leaders themselves. In this dynamic, you'll become like a coach or a mentor who takes a sincere interest in developing others' potential. Now, this is a tough exercise for entrepreneurs. You need to think about the values that the company is based on and how operations are supposed to run. Then you need to train others to meet those standards, and you'll want to reward your managers to ensure key performance indicators are still being met. Now, this isn't going to happen overnight, but when it's done right, you can begin to step away and leave the daily operations in the hands of trusted lieutenants. You see, that allows you to focus on more strategic issues and then you can think about the new frontiers of the company. And better yet, when you build a more professional organization, you can devote more time to the activities that you love. Now, some of those activities are going to be inside of the company, but some of those activities may be outside the company. But if you've built a solid professional company, that's going to be your decision to make. You can work in the company if you want, or you can compensate good managers and let them do the work. It's your call. That's why I say that it's at this point when you can feel like you've truly made it. Because that's how I define true success for an entrepreneur. A successful entrepreneur is someone who builds a company to a point that the company runs itself. And there's another lesson to be learned about not being willing to change as your business grows. In addition to the one-man band syndrome, there's the tendency to hang on to what's worked in the past and not be willing to change gears, probably when you should. Another entrepreneur I worked with really struggled with this. Now, I'm going to call her Joni. Joni gives us a really good example of how the bootstrapping mentality that can be helpful when you build a business can later limit its growth and sustainability later on. Here's her story. Joni had a successful small business manufacturing and selling birdhouses. Her product was mostly sold online. She told me that she'd plateaued in her sales, so her dream was to grow the business into more retail outlets. So Joni asked for my advice on how to make that happen. First, I advised her to attend a trade show where she could meet with different retail managers and get a chance to show off her product. So we looked into it, and we learned that the trip would cost probably around $20,000. Now, she decided that that was just too much money to spend, and Joni refused to go, even though I thought the investment would be well worth it. Because if only one retail chain picked up the product, it would make the trip more than worthwhile. Then, I put her in touch with an owner of a True Value home center, and he invited her to participate in a charity event. The event was one where you sat down with a buyer from the chain and you got a half hour to talk about your product. Now, that cost was just $500 and the money went to charity. It gave the entrepreneur a great opportunity to get the undivided attention of a buyer. But Joni turned that opportunity down as well. She said she wanted to grow, but it seemed to me that she wasn't willing to try new things in order to grow. You see, she took a much different route than Jamie. Remember Jamie, the Disney vacation planner? And I hear that Joni is still trying to find a retailer for her birdhouses. So it's essential to keep in mind that as your company grows, you need to change. You need to constantly adapt and try new things to make your business work. Okay, so far we've talked about professionalizing the company as one way to overcome the stresses of being an entrepreneur. Let's look at some other ways that help keep an entrepreneur staying healthy while they manage the stresses of doing the job. I did some research a few years ago with Dr. Don Caraco to see if an exercise regimen would help or hurt entrepreneurs. We recognize that entrepreneurs want their companies to succeed. So we researched these questions. Would time away from the workplace exercising be time well spent? Or should entrepreneurs devote all their energies to that business? Well, our findings found that entrepreneurs who exercise not only outperformed non-exercisers on sales, they also felt better too. So we suggest that if you're an entrepreneur, take the time to exercise regularly. Dr. Caraco and I found that the more you exercise, the better an entrepreneur you are. Your stress is released and you have some quiet time to let you recharge your batteries. A social life outside of work is also another good stress reliever. Find groups to talk about topics that don't pertain to your industry. Stimulate other parts of your brain. In fact, art museums are a great place to go. Heck, take a walk in the park, travel, do something. The key is you need to get away from the business. it'll help you come back to work feeling better and more refreshed. And you might even come across some ideas that you can use in your business by taking all those trips. Now, I recognize that these are basic lessons. They're true for everyone, not just entrepreneurs, but it's just as amazing to me how many people start businesses and then they lose sight of everything else. And as a result, they and their businesses suffer because of it. So I feel compelled to mention it in this course, even if only briefly. Okay, in today's talk, we talked about the stress of being an entrepreneur. This often stems from the one-man band syndrome, and everyone is susceptible to it if you're not careful. But if you're aware of this scenario, then you can avoid it. But if you recognize that you have a finite amount of energy from both physically and emotionally, and that you have a limited amount of time to devote to things in your life, you're going to be a lot better off. Because when the company was smaller, you might have had enough personal resources to meet all the needs of the company. But now that the company is bigger, you'll overextend yourself if you don't get help. This is really all about professionalizing your company. Figure out what your company needs to do, delegate others to do it, coach them to grow into leaders, and then you can find the place where you want to concentrate your energies inside the company. And if you do this, you'll have taken a major step to building a thriving culture where everyone's happy, including you.